Hey, I am so glad you're with us. It is not just me talking this week. I am so happy to have friends here with us on the podcast today. You guys, you're going to know one of them because she's been on my podcast 4,000 times, and I'm trying to get her to come on as a regular co host. So we'll see if she takes on that challenge because she and I have so many fun conversations. My darling, I would say like my daughter, but her mother happens to be here. So I'll be careful, but I do love her like one of my own. Oh, Keri Vasek, I am so glad you're here.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. It's actually been a while since we've talked on here.
It has, but I miss it, and this particular topic I knew would be fabulous, and you had the brilliant idea to invite your mom. So I
I
would like you to introduce your mom and tell us why you thought she would be a great addition to what we're going to talk about today.
Okay, I love getting this job. I was hoping you would give me this job.
Of course.
My mom's name is Laurie, and she, bless her, brilliant mind and tender heart, comes from a long line of women who have broken the mold. And I hold on to that legacy very strongly. Like it's impacted everything that I do. And I think I've seen that in her as I've become an adult. I've realized how much she has broken the mold in her field,
Mm,
where she has been an expert with teaching reading to struggling readers, and helping children who may have learning disabilities, may have other issues, whether it's with their eyes or how their brain processes information. And I've seen her go to the ends of the earth to figure out how to help these kids, and in doing so she has amassed an incredible amount of knowledge and expertise, and I have access to her for free, so it is
that's pretty awesome.
awesome. And now everybody else does too. So this is
And
my mom,
Keri,
Laurie Von Holdt.
I love it. Welcome, Lori. I'm so glad you're here. Listen, it's so interesting. I'm going to say this little personal tidbit before we get to business. What's so interesting, Lori, about Keri and our relationship? Keri and I are very close. When I tell you I love her like one of my girls, I love her like one of my girls. But most of the young women who want me to mentor them, there's lacking in their relationship with their own biological mom. And Keri is one of the few that's like, no, I have the most amazing mom. I don't need a mom. She is incredible. And over and over and over, she sings your praises and what an incredible mom you are to her. And it's obvious because she's incredible. You raised an incredible young lady who also homeschools her 4 children. So if you're listening to this, I met Keri when her oldest was 4, I believe. Right, Keri? So we're now talking 10 years ago.
And now my youngest is 4, almost
Now
5.
your baby is 4. Yeah.
Yeah. And my
So
oldest
Keri,
is 14.
I was going to say, tell us a little bit about your kids, their ages, kind
Yeah,
of.
14, 12, 9, and 4. We've got some solid neurodivergence in the mix in the parents as well as the children. And we've learned by mucking through for a minute.
And you muck well. Okay, so let's get down to business. So a couple of weeks ago, Keri, I saw an Instagram post and it said, I can't homeschooling advice I can't stand. And then the person went on to say, quote, don't worry, your kid will read when he's ready. And this particular post was saying that that wasn't true, that that's terrible advice. You should never tell someone their kid will read when he's ready. Now, I'm thinking back to our first meeting. What did I tell you about your 4-year-old who wasn't reading?
He'll read when he's ready.
He's ready. I believe I've said that about 1,000,000 times. So today I want to talk about why I believe that to be true in my deepest soul as an educator, as a child development specialist, as a homeschool mom of many, why I think that's true. And that's why we wanted Laurie to come because listen, even though I'm a child development specialist, I'm not a reading specialist. I don't focus on when there's issues beyond, so I am so glad to have her here. So let's talk about, Laurie, what do you think about that blanket statement? I know it's blanket, but what do you think about it?
And I would have, as you read that to me, I would have a tiny bit of grace in that. If this person is saying a child doesn't always read by osmosis, okay, like when they're ready, all of a sudden they're not going to wake up one morning and just, I understand it all. I have seen it happen, however. I have seen kids wake up and be able to, they've gained knowledge by things that they've seen and they've heard and they've been read to and those kind of things. So
I had a
give that-
daughter that did that. Yeah.
I would give that a little bit of grace in that thought process. Like, reading isn't necessarily an osmosis type of thing. There's sometimes direction needs to be given, often direction needs to be given, and it can be helpful and it can be key, all of those things. However, waiting until your child is ready is so important. And when education started demanding that children be able to read in kindergarten, that kind of was a breaking point for me, because I think that is dangerous.
Can we go back, Mom? Can you share what your educational history is? You became a teacher in...
I got my teaching degree in but I got that in elementary education and a special education. I got 2 degrees at the same time, 1978.
And you got deaf education.
And it was deaf education. You have to take you have to learn all the different areas of special education. So yeah, there's a broad learning band in that. So I had a love of teaching reading from the very, very beginning. And as I helped kids learn, I was in a regular classroom. And as I helped kids learn, I discovered all sorts of different things about how they were learning and what they were doing and what their struggles might be. And so I kept trying to advance my knowledge base and found that very few people would step out of the box to learn about root causes of things. Like, they might give you techniques to do, things to try, play games, all those kind of things, except nobody wanted to get down to root causes. And so there was no degree I could get. I could only find people that knew things and learn from them. And so I stretched what I did. And so I got my degree in 78, taught a couple years in a school, had children, and immediately moved into helping kids learn to read who were struggling with reading. So that's my basic background. So I've always had a heart for kids who struggle, but also a heart for how every learner learns differently, the individual part of each student, because I can't ever approach a student the same way. And I've seen students this many years.
That's so key. That is so key for anybody listening who is parenting, homeschooling multiple children. You can never teach them the same way. And I think the number one advice that I give is you got to get to know your child. Like, you really need to know their interest, what excites them, how they learn. Like, do they receive information orally, or do they need it, visually, or how do they receive the information? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. You even have to key into how do they hide? Like, we all
Yes.
hide our inadequacies, and even little kids will try to hide their inadequacies. You just kind of have to learn if they're hiding, what are they hiding, and how do they do that? How do they show that? And I think that it gives you a vision into their heart, because once you start hiding things, you know that your self-esteem is a little bit challenged. And that is one of the key things I struggle with requiring kids to learn when we tell them to learn instead of when they're ready to learn. Because if they're not
100%.
ready to learn, it messes with their self-esteem. It messes with their value. It messes with who they think they are and their ability to do things. And that's just not true.
One of the saddest things for me is to see a child who, when you see them memorizing Brown Bear, and they start reading it or something, but then they say something wrong. And I don't know if you've witnessed it, but I have, and a parent will come down hard and correct them right there, get onto them when they have just tackled this book and they're so confident with Brown Bear. And then you can almost visually see that child just no longer willing to take risks the next time you ask them to read about, no, I don't know how to read that. It blows my mind that parents don't understand the damage that is done to a child socially and emotionally when we push them before they're ready. Listen, Laurie, I get fired up about it. There are fewer things that fire me up more than a child being damaged by a parent who pushes too early.
I totally agree with you. Soapbox for me.
Yes.
serious soapbox. Yeah. Serious,
But I
serious.
think we've been through, Mom, you and I, like, and Kathy, you've been along for the bulk of the ride.
Yeah.
Uh, but like with my four, it's been so different where I had my first one who I let him go slow and we focused on the relationship with books. We read aloud, we did audiobooks. He could not read, but this child would say he loved books, love them. And then one morning we went from barely sounding out words to waking up and reading Peter and the Starcatchers. So that was, and that Mom's laughing right now. Note for the audio. Mom's laughing because I called her with my curriculum and I was like, so like, what do I do? Because I feel like he skipped ahead. And she goes, what? Tell me what makes you think you still need that. And I was like, okay. And it was really because I thought I should. And she was like, Keri,
Yes.
he's beyond that. Like, yeah, he just jumped ahead. He was just ready.
He was
And
just ready.
now, so he was, how old was he, Mom? Like 8.5?
8.5.
And now I have a 9-year-old. Girl would, this is one who you're like, all right, if we, yes, wait until
I love that your mom is laughing so hard.
wait until she's ready. Girl kind of needs a shove off a roof because she would either climb on that roof, then sit down and try to read. And everything in between. And now I have a 4-year-old at the same time is learning to read. He wants to, he's like pulls out, Mom, what does this say? What is this? What sound does this make? So it's such a gap. And then I literally was sitting down with the second born or thinking about the second born child with Evie. And like somebody asked me when she started to read and I was like, don't know. Like, I think she taught herself at some point because she wanted to. And so it's just been so different. And so we watched Noah do this wait till he's ready. And then we ran into Claire. Like, I think there is something more going on. I think she has an eye that wanders. Her eyes look tired when she's looking at words. And so the reading journey with each of them has just been so different. Would you add to that, Mom?
Oh, it's even their whole learning journey, not just reading, because it's a little snippet into how they learn and how they think and how they process. And spelling is different for learning to spell is different for one than for another. How they process math, Claire and math, like it smokes, And so to any parent out there who really is listening to this, to understand that you're not evaluating what they can do necessarily. You're looking to see what they're doing. You're looking to see, all right, so when you have someone that is listening auditorily to books and loving stories, great. He is developing auditory listening skills and developing all these other things. Please know that every part of learning is a part of learning. Just understand that that's what they're doing. Do you need to help support them in other things? Always. So evaluate, don't look at what your child is doing and use that as a benchmark for where they should be or as a comparison or as a grade or a pass fail or a brilliancy or anything. Just look, be realistic. This is what they're doing. How can this one do this better? Okay, let's do this better. Does this require some visual improvement in visual? Well, look at each little piece for what it is, not for what you think your child should do or shouldn't do or can do or can't do. This is not a reflection on a parent as a parent. It's not a reflection on a child as to their abilities. It's you taking into account what they are doing and you looking to see how you can help them better.
I think that's so important that you noted that it's not on the parents. I think so many of us as parents have shame if our kids are not keeping up with what the national standard says, which is not based on anything. We're going to now expect kindergartners to read. That's kind of a just let's pull it out of the air because nothing in brain research supports that. I mean, yes, there are some kids that can read at 5. Absolutely. I had one read like yours. I don't know when she learned. She was about 4 and she just started reading. I didn't do anything. But most of mine were closer to 7, 8, and even 1. My youngest Henry, very much like your Claire, fabulous at math, couldn't care less, loved words, loved stories, but surely didn't want to read. But now that kid is killing it in college. Killing it in college. You know, he's writing papers that I wish I could write. So it isn't a reflection on us as parents, and it's not a reflection on your kids how smart they are. When they read does not dictate how smart they are.
Right. You know what's so interesting too, as you're saying this? Mom was working with Noah probably a year or two ago. So my oldest, he would have been like 12, 13 at the time, just working on spelling. It is not his favorite. And we had been getting up in the morning, doing it first thing. And she called me and she goes, "What would you think about moving this to the afternoon? I don't think he's doing well with this in the morning. I think he needs time to wake up." So we simply moved it just the time of day, just her noticing that and changing the time of day when we worked on something. Did it not make a massive difference, Mom? Do you remember that?
Don't even remember this.
Because you just do it
We
naturally.
just try and adapt as we go. Like I have students
Uh-huh.
at school like that all the time. Oh my gosh, this exhausts them. What we do in the morning exhausts them. I can't ruin their whole day at school. I have got to have them in the afternoon last thing so that I haven't ruined their day. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
So
then with
go ahead.
Claire, like you're like 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes. And then we're going to talk and you can type in the chat and cuz she works with them on Zoom. So it's 5 minutes and she shows up and works hard, but it's not a pushing. I don't even know how to describe how you work with the kids. It's so celebratory. It's gosh, I think, Mom, you could explain it, but I don't feel like you would hype
Hype yourself up enough.
you've taught me to be so encouraging and celebrate every little thing that they are doing.
Well, can I tell the story of why we're doing what we're doing with Claire?
Yeah.
Okay. So Claire got to listen to Harry Potter book 1 and she loved it. And she wanted to
I
listen
bet
to
she did,
Harry
knowing
Potter
Claire.
too. And Keri said, you're going to have to read that one. And so, yeah, or you have to be a certain age, right?
Because her auditory processing is not at a point where it would be an enjoyable process for any of us to get to the second book.
So Keri said, this age or do it yourself. And so she came to me and I said, by golly, let's do it. Then we'll read Harry Potter book 2. And here's my copy right here at my desk.
Stop it, you
And
guys.
I'm not kidding. We're on page 3 at 5 minutes a time. But this girl is doing it. And I want her to see, and this is why it's not about, I could level her to where, like, if you took her into school and did a leveling test, they'd say, put her in this and this. Like, that isn't what she wants to read. She can learn to read whatever she wants to read. So let's read what you want to read. And we dig in, and for 5 minutes, we get through a paragraph, right? About a paragraph each time. And she has expression, and we can make sure she knows what's happening, and we can talk about words. And if her little brain starts to flip, I say, we have to get through this part first, then we can do all the chatting. And it helps her see she can do whatever she wants to do. Like, she wants to read Harry Potter, doggone it. Read Harry Potter, girl. So I
love that.
All kids to realize that they have that. This isn't you're only able, it's the other thing. Like when you're just starting to learn to read and they say, well, you have to learn to read in this order and you are only able to read these books because that's what the test says. I get a little cranky about that. So
she gets very fiery.
I do.
Listen, I have a feeling we could all rant together. Give us a box to stand on. Well, let's go back. Let's talk to the young mom listening who hadn't even started to teach a kid to read. So they're like sitting here freaking out, going, wait, what? What are y'all even talking about? Let's put them at ease and give them some suggestions. How would you start? You're fresh. You've got a 3-year-old and you're listening to this thinking you're going to have to teach reading. What's the first thing you would tell them to do, Laurie?
I would say if I would introduce them to stories. Like
Yes.
it doesn't have to, you don't have to even be reading a picture book. My 3 children, when they were young, did not sit on my lap and look at books. Even Keri, like sitting on my lap and looking at books was not something that they loved to do. And I pictured doing that. If your child loves that, great. Introduce them to stories. You can tell stories. So when you're with a 3-year-old and you want them to learn to read, telling them stories or talking to them is the beginning of that, causing an interest in the story. What do you think might happen next? I mean, anything that is a storytelling adventure begins that love of reading. We want them to love to read. We want them to love to find information. We want them to love those things.
Yeah, I agree totally. I mean, we start in the curriculum. That is, in fact, I'm editing the curriculum right now. And every single month, we are making a book together so that the kids are telling stories. We are journaling together so that there's stories going on. So not only are the parents telling the story some of the time, the children are being given permission to tell a story. And I'm helping the parents because parents don't know necessarily how to ask their child to tell a story. So we're having to teach the parents how to ask good questions, asking open ended questions, and realizing that words have power. I'm a firm believer that if you want kids to love to read, you got to help them fall in love with words. I mean, and use fun words and descriptive words and build that vocabulary when they're young. All of that is kind of like that foundation work. I always tell parents, like parents want to jump into reading. It's like building the house. They want it to be decorating, right? And what we're saying is that there's so many foundation things that we have to do. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. Starting with stories is a beautiful, beautiful way to do it.
Make a
So
book by
moving,
putting their own pictures in, put
yes.
pictures of your child in a little book, turn the pages, like all of those kind of things. Yeah, that's the beginning.
Yeah. What about, are you a fan of like memorizing the alphabet, flashcards, sight words? There's so many things that people are using to teach reading. Help them understand, what do you think kind of the process is moving beyond stories?
Okay. First of all, I do not like teaching a child to read until they are truly ready to do that. And they will show an interest in things. They see written words all the time. They will show an interest in that. I think that is the first thing I would truly, truly pay attention to. I'm going to push some people's buttons, but I hate sight words. I hate sight words. I hate sight words. I think that it's like, here's a dictionary. Can you memorize this for me? There is no way. Our English language might be a little confusing, but it is not as confusing as people think. So do we need to know the alphabet? Yeah, we really do need to know the alphabet. But when I work with students who are struggling, they've all learned the alphabet ABC all the way through, right? I have them make it in clay letters and they start with Z so that they see that the letters, so they do Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T all the way up to A, because then they see that the letters are separate things. They have a name and they have a job. And right now, yes, Keri, you look like
You have kids make letters in clay. Just little kids?
no. Thank you, Keri. I have students right now in my room at school. I have clay letters set all over because I have kids. It's a technique I use for kids who are dyslexic, but it's a technique I use for kids who struggle with all sorts of perception things or just understanding that there are letters and they have a job and they can be rather concrete. So I had kids up through 8th grade making clay letters because we needed that little root piece, that little foundational piece that might have a crack in it. We need to fix that. If we can go to the root cause of things, let's do that instead of throwing things at symptoms,
Totally agree.
So
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. I always tell parents, I'm like, the most important letters for a kid is the letters in their name. Like, that's what they care about the most. Like, they want to start with their name. So start there. If you want to know what letters to start with their name and let them build out of Play-Doh or whatever. Make it something that matters and you're going to hook them in. I mean, it's all part
And
of that, isn't it?
to get excited about their letters.
Yes.
Like anytime, Aaron, we would just play up, and I have 3 bigger kids who would help with that, but just play up. It's an A, just like Aaron, and he gets so excited because it's his name, it's his letter,
and it holds power for them. That shows them that words and letters have power. I love that you say a job. I don't know that I've ever heard it like that specifically, but I love that. So how do you know? I think how do you know that a child is interested in this? What are the signs we're looking for to show,
Well,
oh, wait, this child's interested?
They're going to pretend that they're reading. They're going to sit there and pretend, like they're going to point at words and pretend that they're reading something like that. There's just you're going to just see it. You're going to see it start to happen. You're going to
asking what words say, what things say. Mom, what does this say?
What does this say? I love it when they,
Right.
while I don't love sight words, I do love when they recognize, oh, mom's going to Starbucks again. Oh, Target. We're going to Target, when they see the logos and they see that and they know what it represents. I love to see that aha in them even. And I'm like, oh, I realize I go to Target too much.
You do have an underlying issue here, though. I hope that I'm not pushing this a little bit too far, but there's maybe some people here who are listening who have their kids in a school system, and they might be immersed in a school system where they are being required to read. They're being required to learn things. They're being required. And a parent is going to have to be able to evaluate, is my child ready to do this? Do they have to move forward to some degree, even if they're not ready, because the school is requiring it? I think that we have a little bit of, it's nice to say, is my child ready to read? And as a homeschool parent, handle that, right? But when you're in a system that says, we are doing this, I think that it presents a little bit different problem I shouldn't say problem, something that a parent is going to have to face. Number one, like I said before, it's not about whether your child is capable or incapable. It's something where a parent's going to have to evaluate to say, okay, is my child ready or is my child not ready? And how do I navigate this with a teacher? How do I navigate this with a curriculum? And how can we come together to create a plan that will allow for my child to grow at the rate my child wants and needs to grow without pressure being put on him or her? So
I love that. What would you say if a parent, let's go back to homeschooling. If they are starting the 100 easy lessons or pick any phonics program, and they see that their child is resistant. I see this all the time. Parents talking about this. My kid is miserable. They start crying the minute I bring out the phonics lessons. What would you say to them?
Stop phonics. I mean, I love my phonics.
I
My
agree.
cards are sitting right here somewhere. I love my phonics. But if that causes them stress, let's stop it. Let's find something that's back up a little bit, that's causing some stress. What is causing that stress? And I would back up to see, how far do you need to back up? Get out of that hole. How far do you have to back that vehicle up to get out of that hole? And patch that hole before you drive across it again.
I love that.
I mean, I would add, if they're 3, 4, 5, and they're up, just let me say what you told me, Kathy. Let him play. Put some shaving cream out and draw a letter A and C, or an N, because at the time it was Noah. Draw his name and see if he's interested in it. If he's not, let him play in it.
Right?
Like, there just isn't. I think it's interesting hearing you talk, Mom, about schools, because while technically homeschooling means that we are free of those standards, I still see so many people, so many parents still pretty obsessed with those standards.
Obsessed
With those standards.
Yeah.
And I think, like, looking back on the last, 14 years of raising kids, I think the thing I'm most proud of is having the guts to press forward with what I know about, not blindly turning off my volume to the world in an unwise and foolish way. But being able to say standards are arbitrary. Let's look at how standards have changed in the last 5 years. Children have not changed in the last 5 years. The standards shouldn't have changed, but they have. So that tells me that it's not an issue with kids, it's an issue with standards, with the measuring stick. So to be able to push against and to quiet a system and an expectation that we've all been raised in for so many years, and to quiet that and actually listen to child development experts, to mental health professionals, to experts in fields like my sweet mother. Because when you listen to those people, they are saying the same thing generally, which is let your children be children, read books to your children, delight in your children.
That makes me
And
a little teary.
that a child's relationship, and I think this is the part that gets me fiery, is that a child's relationship to a subject matters. So if you're pushing reading on a child and you're forcing that, they will, like Mom, you were talking about that earlier, they get this like icky feeling. That doesn't feel good. I remember being in junior high school being forced to read things, and I could read great. I was a good reader, good student. But being forced to read things I didn't want to read, I didn't like. And bless my mother who said, just get the Cliff Notes. She's like, it's fine.
Same. I said the same. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
No, bless her. She'll even tell you a story about when I made up the ending to a book for a paper I was writing. But that being said, I think even when I was a kid, she understood your relationship to something matters. I think it's why children hate math for the same reason, because people are trying to push math on children when they are not ready. And so it's not that a child is not good at math. It's not that people are not math people. It's that you have been brainwashed to believe that you are bad at math because you were forced to learn it before your brain was ready to receive it.
So interesting you say that. My college daughter just said that same thing. She goes, Mom, I always thought I was bad at math because, at her school, they would do certain math things and she would hate it. And the way the teacher taught it, she just didn't click. But she's taking some like math in real life classes, and she's taken psychology stats this semester. She's like, I'm actually really good at math. I'm like, yeah, you are. You are really good at math. But she was scared of it because she didn't conquer it or wasn't taught to approach it the way that her brain worked. And now that she's, psychology's her love and doing stats about that, she's killing it. So it is fascinating, isn't it?
Well, and when we focus on just the relationship with reading, the relationship with books, the relationship with stories, and approaching it in a gentle and encouraging way when we need to, what a gift we give our kids, because there are also so many other things that are just stories. History is just stories.
Yeah.
It's stories. It's not dates and names and multiple choice. It's stories of real people who did real things.
Yes.
And if we're not falling in love with stories, how will we understand and love history? Like, we're robbing them of so much if we don't allow them to really fall in love with the story and have a good relationship with reading.
One of my favorite stories is an aunt of mine. She has now passed away. She wrote a bunch of stories about her childhood, and I had asked her to do that before she passed away, and she did. And she wrote this particular story about when she was a young girl. She would love to go outside and climb a tree. And she would take her geography book with her, and she would sit in a tree and she would read her geography book. And she said why she loved it so much is as she read about the places, she would sit as a young girl and imagine going there and imagine being in those places. And it just thrilled her because of that. And I just loved that story and I thought, isn't that wonderful? Like just the visual of that, of this young girl climbing a tree with her geography book, and you could just see the joy on her face as she's imagining that. That to me is falling in love with reading. That to me is falling in love with stories and what it looks like for our children.
Well,
Let's go ahead. Sorry.
it's also giving a seeing the whole person.
Yeah,
Like, so you have this whole person view of learning instead of mom, what you run into a lot, which is when mom gets in trouble a little bit, is everybody wants something where you can go check,
they do.
check, 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 and that's
Well, I always say reading is like potty training, right? I mean, I love the poor parents who think they're going to potty train their 5-month old, and I watch them, and you realize that you know what? By the time kids are 3 or 4, they're mostly potty trained. None are going to college, right, in diapers. But how they get there and how it looks varies, and the stress of the parents, the stress on the kids. Are they bribed? But the ones who wait and just wait till their kids are ready, they buy the panties, they pull the potty out, they talk about it, they read the books, and then they make it just a quick weekend thing when the kid is ready is an easy process without stress. Reading is the same way. If you start it when they're 3, and we're going to read, we're going to read, we're going to do all the things, you see the stress rising in both the parents and the child. But if you do all that foundational work, you buy the books, you tell the stories, you get the things ready, most of the time can be a pretty easy process. Now, we do know, and one of the main reasons, Lori, I wanted you here, what do we do when it's not? We've done all the right things and something just isn't working with our child. We do believe there's more to it. How do we recognize that and where do we go for help?
Great. Well, I think I really love the first thought that first, let's make sure that they have reached that readiness spot and that they're
Mhm.
fine. I think that we have to get curious with them. It still isn't about how quickly they read, I hate the word fluent because I think that the meaning of fluent has just morphed and it isn't. I don't care how fast a child can read. That is not ever an indicator for an accurate anything in reading. But I think we need to start getting curious. Say we have a 5-year-old who is ready to read and is struggling. It's time to get curious. Like, start noticing things. Ask them, do the words on the page ever move or wiggle when you're looking at them? Do you ever see spots on the page, colored spots that really aren't there, but you kind of see them in their vision in your eyes? And start asking them questions. Start looking to see if they have started to read and you see that you're paying attention to not what the mechanics are, but are they switching things around? Like, you're not just guiding them through, but as they're reading, do they switch some words around? Start paying attention to those little things and start grabbing those things kind of as your evidence to say, okay, now we need to make sense of all of these things. Do they get headaches? Do they start out and start reading pretty well and then it gets harder, 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 harder? That tells me something different. So you're going to look at them and say, all right, if I hold up a finger 6 inches from your nose, can you see one finger? What happens when you look at one finger? Now, sometimes we have things that aren't quite yet developed. So all of these things are happening at the same time, which is why it's so important to be gentle with our children, because even when they're 8, they are still developing the ability to look at a board, look up, and then look down and transfer that. That is an ability that is not completely developed in their bodies until that time. And we all don't develop at the same rate. So it could even come after that, could come a little bit before, could come a little after. So in a regular classroom, to look up and see something and have to transfer that down here, they could lose their place. It could be hard. It could be all sorts of things. Looking from a book to a paper, like, does that change things? Do they lose perspective? Do things seem confusing? Just get curious, because there are so many different things that I can see that will go, oh, I might see something I'm going to be watching for dyslexia down the road. I might going to be watching for that, but it also could be cross dominance, where you might be right-handed and your left eye is dominant. Like, we need to be cognizant that There are all sorts of things at play. So get curious. Start getting curious. Do they lean over their paper with their head straight or their book's head straight down? Can they and have to have that viewpoint of their book or their paper when they're reading? Do they squint? What do they do? Do they
Claire's eyes start watering.
Do their eyes start watering? Do they rub their eyes? Do they cover an eye? Like when they lean over, do they start covering an eye or rub one specific eye? Lean on one arm, twist their bodies, twist their paper around a funny way. Even I had one student that she tripped up the bleachers in the gym every time. That tells me something. That told me that there was a disconnect between her visual and her body. I mean, so there are all, and that played into her reading. So it is, our bodies are connected all the way through. So pay attention. Are they able to manage 3 directions at once or only one? You know, we have auditory processing happening while we have visual processing happening. And so we have to figure out what piece that is. So say you have this child, he's in kindergarten and the teacher wants him to read and you see he's ready to read and he's trying and he is frustrated. Okay. Start being curious. Does he understand that a letter has a job? Does he understand what the letters are? That they're just letters that go together? Or does he get confused right away? Start right where he is and start asking all those questions. Okay. So the easiest one would be, do they understand the letters? Do they understand they have jobs? Do they see the spaces between words? Do they know there are spaces between the words? So get curious. Once you're diving into where a child really has a learning problem, it can feel very confusing and anxiety producing for a parent as well as a child. So first of all, the child needs to know they're okay, that mom and dad are their people and they are going to help them figure out what's going on and it's going to be fine. Like there's nothing, you're not broken. You know, we're going to figure out how to make this easier for you. So the parent just needs to start where they are and be curious and ask all the questions.
Now you're using, so go ahead.
Like, it's okay. Like, stay calm. You don't need to like rush to a specialist.
No, just get curious and start noting things. Like, what do they do? Like, they're still going to probably do those things. They're probably still going to lean over their book. Write that down. Just know that that's happening so that and I don't mean to, I've listed a whole lot of things that I see. I don't want to panic any parent in any way, shape, or form. I think that I'm just saying gather information, because when you gather that information, we can put them together like puzzle pieces and say, oh, well, they do this, this, and this. Let's take them to the eye doctor, see how they're seeing. Are they seeing what they need to see?
Or it could be they're doing this, this, and this. Well, maybe they are kind of ready to read, but they're also 5.
Right.
And this is all developmentally appropriate.
Right. Like I had a 5-year-old last year. He was ready to read. He kind of wanted to read, but doggone it, he just didn't want to. He really wanted to play. I told the parents, let him play. Like, you don't need me for summer tutoring. You need to let him play. So
Can I interrupt
curious
for a second on that, Laurie? Because I want to say too, don't discount that value and to let them play. Remembering that, just going back to your shaving cream example, even if they're not ready to write their name in it, they're building fine motor skills that are going to help them write. I mean, that play is still getting them to the end result of reading and writing. Them doing dramatic play and pretending they're having conversations with other kids. Those conversations are, again, recognizing that words have power and words have meaning. So that play really is contributing to getting them there. It's just a different way to get them there. And so I just want to go back to, we're using the example of a 5-year-old, but like Keri said, I'm not saying there aren't 5-year-olds who are ready. Totally there are. But it just might be they're not ready enough. They just need a little more time. And this same scenario can happen with a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old. And I think that's where parents start panicking. You get a kid who's 8 and you're starting to think, okay, something is 100% wrong. When sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't. So again, it's how do we give the parents the confidence to know the difference? I think that's what most every parent wants to know. Well, how do I know? How do I know if something is wrong? And I love that you said get curious.
Well,
Well,
and can
because
I also add that we learned that my mom in this field all these years, and we learned that I was dyslexic and had eye issues at 19, and I was fine. I was okay.
well,
So
and I think that's the underlying thing. You're not broken. Nothing is broken here. This is nothing that is an emergency. So your child is 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 and not reading. Don't panic. Just be
Yes.
curious. Note all the different things and just don't panic. Don't worry. They're not broken. They're going to be okay. Okay. So just yesterday, I thought I should start making a list of what my students that I've worked with are now doing in their lives. Because the students that I see are all students that struggled. I walked into the pharmacy yesterday to pick up something for my husband who's just had surgery. There's my dear Ava, who is managing the pharmacy and has just applied to nursing school. Then I have a student whose IQ, she's now 43 years old. Her IQ probably sits at a 70. She's definitely challenged. She works in a thrift store. She works in the back. She has a job where she goes every single day, and she loves her life and she loves who she is. I have another student who drives a truck for UPS successfully. I have all these students, and I just told you at the most, well, Ava wasn't my most at risk, but some very at risk kids who are just fine. Their parents love them. They're doing their best for them. They did their best for them, and they grew up to be the best version of themselves. Like, none of us are brilliant. I think there's always somebody more brilliant than we are. There's somebody who can always do things differently or better than we can in any way. So how do we make the best version of our child and help them be that best version of themselves? And so when we have something like reading is becoming a struggle, yes, we know our kids need to read through life. And I know Claire needs to read through life. She's going to read. She's going to read. We'll get her there. It does not need to be a situation where this situation causes them to feel less about themselves or like they aren't good enough. And I think that is the most critical piece. Be curious. Write down all the things that you see so that if you find a professional that will give you like a direction to go, grab it and take it and see. But it's not for you to fix them. It's for you to help them do something better. But it's not we're not about fixing our children. We're working on helping them to have the skills that they need, to do the things that they love, to find joy in things that they think are hard, to find tenacity, to find strength, to find and realize that they have the courage and the opportunity to do whatever they want in those areas.
And I've said, I heard you say, like Claire's going to read. Have said so many times, we as a culture, we are not plagued by a bunch of people walking around who cannot physically read to some degree. We are plagued. We do have a problem with people who do not feel good enough. We have a problem with mental health. We have a problem with people who do not feel loved or feel like they are valued. And that is more important than when or how our children learn to read.
And it starts here.
Preach it, preach it, preach it. It does. It does start here. And we set the tone. Like, we get to be the ones that set the temperature gauge for our home, for our kids, and how they feel about it. And listen, Keri knows me so well and knows that I preach relationship over it all. Relationship. And what that relationship means is that you take the time to see your child and you take the time to show up for your child. And I think that's what we're saying with all of this. Lauri, you have been amazing. If they want to follow you on Instagram, what's your Instagram handle?
Your, YOUR _ essential, ESSENTIAL _ educator. Okay.
Awesome.
Yep. Please, and
Go
reach out
follow
to me.
Laurie.
I'm not the greatest at Instagram, y'all. I'm working on it, but I will answer all your questions. I will try and post about the things that need to be posted about. I can say words. Writing words is hard for me. So
Same.
writing thoughts, I have lots of them, but getting them out, I call Keri. Keri, how do I say this?
Speaking of Keri, our little wordsmith, right?
Yes.
I see her precious book in the background, and I still have to push it because I love Kisses from Space that Keri wrote with her cousin last year, and so delightful. I know you are a proud mama. I'm a proud whatever I am, friend, big sister, whatever. So proud of the way she writes and the story she tells. She inspires me. So go follow Keri. Keri, what Instagram do you want them to follow you on?
Keri_Vasek, Vasek.
Hey, I appreciate you guys talking about the subject with me. I love that you're so passionate. And Laurie, thank you for helping those kids who are struggling. I know you've made a difference in so many lives. So good to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.